Hey people, welcome to the Men's Chamber, your number one men's Christian podcast. And today we are going to speak about a topic that you love to hear as we even begin episode 1. Men and the church. Are we effective in ministering to the men? So that is the topic that we are going to handle here in the Men's Chamber. I am your host, Austin Agwa. And I have an amazing guest with me. I will allow him to introduce himself and tell us what he does, how many books you have written. Just tell us, what do you want people to know about you?
All right, I'm very excited to be here in the Men's Chamber today. My name is Boniface Nyoi Kenganga. I'm an author, I'm a trainer, and I love doing men's ministry because I believe that when men get it right, everybody wins. And when men don't get it right, everybody pays a price. So again, like I've said, I do capacity building and I help people to live authentic lives that have an aura of excellence and to teach them to learn how to lead themselves well and to lead others well as well.
Nice. And you have authored several books. Tell us about the books you have authored.
Yes, since this is a men's chamber, perhaps I'll specifically focus on the men's books that I've written.
Yes.
I wrote my first book 12 years ago for men.
Yes.
It is called Towards Authentic Manhood.
Yes.
And it is basically a journey into understanding what does it mean to be a real man?
Yes.
What does it look like to be a real man? And what does it take to be a real man?
Yes.
Then a few years later, I did a book called The Hubby's Hub.
Yes.
This is a book for husbands. Having just audited some of the mistakes I made in marriage, I decided to put them together in a book and to share them with the world so that other men can avoid the mistakes that I made and they can also learn from the experiences that I had. Later, I also discovered that a lot of challenges that men face surround the area of character. So I did a book for men called The Quest for Authentic Character.
Wow.
Building strength into your soul as a man. And the theme of that book is the idea that you are as strong as your character and you are as weak as your character. So as high as your character goes, that sets the limit of how far you'll go.
Yeah.
Then I finished by doing a book for men in the marketplace. It's called The Excellence Code, How to Be a Man of Excellence in a World of Mediocrity.
Yes.
So that basically speaks to the idea that for you as a man, your biggest currency in the marketplace is your excellence.
Wow.
So, and I'm going to do many more, but those are a few of what I've done.
Yes, and our audience should be able to get those specific books for the men.
Absolutely.
And today we are handling a topic, men and the church.
Yes.
Are we effectively ministering to the men?
Yeah.
We can be doing a lot about the men's ministry.
Yeah.
But the question is, are we effective? So the question is, there's been a question people are asking, why do men don't go to church? Why do men feel that they're passive? They don't want to go to church. And sometimes even their wives seem to drag them to church. They go there forcefully. But they seem not to be so attached to the church. They acknowledge the goodness of Christ, the value, but they seem there's something that they're not getting from the church. So what do you think happens? Why do men where are the men? Where did we lose the men, especially in the church?
That's an interesting question because, interestingly, the first thing that I want to underscore is that men are interested in spiritual things.
Wow, yes.
But how those things are packaged determines whether the men will be engaged or they will be disengaged. I was having an interesting conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and I was telling him, it's amazing how difficult it is to bring Christian men to a prayer meeting. And yet when you look at the Muslim community, for example, you find that every day the men are in the mosque praying. So what is it that they get in that other environment that they don't get in this other environment? And I think the first thing that I want to underscore is the fact that over the years, there has been what is called the feminization of the presentation of the gospel.
Uh-huh.
In other words, we've presented the gospel in a way that has a lot of emotionalism, and men are not very emotional creatures. Men are logical creatures.
Yeah.
So when a man comes to a spiritual environment, he will try to make sense of it logically.
Yeah.
And if he feels like this is not making sense for me logically, then they will not feel the need to engage. What we call passivity among men, especially in spiritual sense, is men actually saying, I'm trying to make sense of this thing, but I can't. And because I cannot make sense of it logically, I don't feel inspired to engage. So what we need to do is to see how do we package the things that we want to do for men in a way that appeals to the logic of a man. There's something else that I like telling people, especially within the church circles, and it's the idea that there is an energy in a man that is activity driven. So men rally around an activity. That's why when you read the scriptures all through, you will see men either going to war, or men building things, or men conquering things. So if we don't sculpture our spiritual environments around those ideas, how do we help men to win? How do we help men to conquer? How do we help men to become warriors? And above all that, how do we help men to feel like they're in a safe environment? Because again, a man does not connect where he doesn't feel safe. So a lot of the things that are around why men are disengaging from church are around those factors. That number one, we are not speaking a language that appeals to men. Number two, we are not tapping into the energy of masculinity, which is a conquering energy. It's a leading energy. And then number three, I'm not sure we are creating a safe environment. We are creating a space where men feel, hey, am I safe enough to open here? Maybe not. I'll go to the bar and open up there. Yes.
So you have spoke about the man's language.
Yes.
How does the man's language, especially in this particular setup, look like? So that at the end of the day, we also don't raise men who are soft because of that particular environment.
Yes.
So we find that men are soft and they begin even to frustrate people.
Yes.
We have some kind of raised men that are wimpy. So what kind of language is this? The man's, what kind of, you have said the man's language.
The man's
How
language,
does it look like?
So I'll give you a very practical example. If you look at football, which is something men love, in a football game, men submit to somebody called a coach. A coach is very different from a counselor. A counselor tells you what to do. But a coach shows you that you have what it takes to know what to do. So they call that out. They create a space for that to find expression. And that is what I call speaking to the king in a man. Anytime you want to appeal to a man, speak to the king in him, not the wimp in him. Because every man has a king side and a wimp side. Unfortunately, look at the language, for example, we use in church spaces. We tell a man, lift up your hands and cry to God. For a man, crying is weakness. For a man, crying is saying, I'm surrendering to the elements around me. But tell a man, here is something we want to build. The language of Nehemiah. Let's build. Let's overcome. Let's conquer. Let's champion. And again, the other thing about men are driven by a cause. If you give men something bigger than them, something worth dying for, they'll be willing to engage. So our language has got to be a language that speaks to those realities, that a man has a king that wants to find expression. What are we doing to make sure that that king comes out? Let me give you a practical example with, again, just doing a comparative analysis with other religions. If you look at other religions, the place of a man is validated. It is known the man is the leader. It is known the man is the king. It is known the man is the one who actually creates leadership and orders how the direction of a place will be. But when you look at, for example, how we even position people for leadership in the church, it is usually, again, somehow feminized, because even the things that we sell, how we sell the idea of men serving God, it looks like it's not something that will appeal to their conquering energy. So again, it is how we sculpture what we say. It is not that what we are saying is weak or impotent. It is how we are saying it that is determining whether the men will want to engage or not. Let me add one more thing that I think is important. Men fear feeling judged. In fact, if there is one thing that will turn a man off any day is when a man feels judged and when he feels like you're trying to combat him or corner him, like telling him, and again, you see this language in the story of King David. When King David fell and the prophet Samuel comes to confront him, there's a language he uses, right? He comes and gives a story and says, there was this guy who did this, and then this other guy that did this. What do you think should be done to that guy? So look at what is happening in that story. The prophet is appealing to the logic of the king. And when logic is appealed to, then men are willing to engage.
And there's something you have said about the man's language.
Yes.
Then where do we draw the line? Because at the end of the day, we find most churches have male pastors. So is it that these pastors do not understand? Because from that position, already you have already a male figure in the
leadership.
pulpit. So they should be able to express this particular man's language. Yes.
So I think one of the things that happens, especially with men, number one, we need to appreciate that gathering men is not like gathering women. To gather men, all you need is a language that appeals to emotions. For men to buy in, number one, men already feel like they are leaders. So they don't want to feel like they are being led. They want to feel like we are leading this together. They want to feel like they are part of it. They own the vision. They are not, in a sense, like championing another person's vision. They want to own the vision. So one of the challenges that a lot of people who try to lead men fail in is how they sell the vision. They sell the vision as me trying to make you something instead of me engaging you together so that we can take a journey to conquering. So the vision, the way a vision is sold, again, it's usually feminized. And you realize that because selling a vision to men has to make sense, which means you've got to sit down and think it through and crack the code of how do we get this men's appetite to be engaged in this. A lot of leaders are not willing to do that work. The other thing that I also realize is a lot of male pastors, interestingly, will champion issues of ladies with a greater passion than they will champion issues of men. And so sometimes men are seated there looking and they're seeing there's a budget for women's ministry, there's a budget for children, and so the men are feeling left out. And so if the lead pastors can begin to champion men's leadership with greater intentionality and a greater way of selling the vision in a logical way that connects with men, I feel like men will begin to engage.
So what happens when in a church setup? Because one, a church can have a men's ministry at the same time, because somebody might be watching us right now and the other gender might feel, what are you guys saying? And because this is a very sensitive topic, they might think the men's language, for example, in the service, does it mean they are excluded from that particular service, or this man's language is used exclusively in the men's ministry? So how do you balance that? Because one, this service has both the
genders,
both genders. So if you say we use the man's language, the lady will say, what about us? So how, because there's a pastor who will be watching and say, now, as a pastor, how do I package, how do I present the gospel to cater for both this gender, both the women and the men? Or do we only let it be in the men's ministry, but not in the main service?
So here is how I'll answer that. One of the figures that I follow that had a very effective men's ministry is the late Dr. Miles Monroe. And the thing about this whole thing is not about excluding one gender and pushing one. It is about learning the balance of inclusivity, that a message can have a female feel and a male feel at the same time. The problem that I'm saying is that most of the times it has a female feel more than, so there is a balance that is lacking. And again, it goes back to how do you even prepare your message? Do you think that there will be men in that audience? What are the needs of those men? How do we communicate the truth in a way that resonates with the hearts of men? So it goes back to the whole way, even about how we communicate. Because again, you can communicate in a certain way for so long that you get a lopsided communication mechanism where you now learn to speak to one side, but you don't know how to speak to another. And I usually say, even if you are that kind of a communicator that has that blind spot, get men that have mastered how to communicate to men every once in a while to come to your congregation so that the men in your congregation can feel the male energy and the male expression of the gospel. And I think when you look at the picture of how Christ communicated, you realize why he was followed by men. For example, look at the vision he gives them. He tells them, go and wait in Jerusalem. I will give you power. There is no man that does not love power. So when Jesus is speaking about giving power, he's speaking a language that men understand. Do you know the reason why men gamble? They're looking for money so that they can get what? Power. Do you know why men go to politics? They're looking for power. Do you know why men, for example, are attracted to things that have something about winning or conquering or overcoming? Like football appeals a lot to men because there is a win at the end game. So if we can learn to include some of those things in how we communicate, we will begin to find that men are warming up to the gospel and the idea of the truth being communicated in a language that makes sense to them.
Because you'll find even a person sitting in a sermon, they're waiting for something to go work with.
Absolutely.
So they're waiting. So does it mean a man can be able to sit through the service?
Yes.
So does the pastor or the person in charge shorten the message? Because what do we do with the sermon? Especially in the space for men. How does the pastor present the sermon? Does it come with being practical? How does it present that sermon?
So there are several aspects that need to be in a healthy sermon, especially that will speak to men. Number one, it has to have an inspiration, which means it needs to awaken a certain sense of vision in men. Again, if you look at the ideas in the Bible, one of the things that God promises men is vision. You know, in the last days I will pour out my spirit upon flesh, all flesh, young men shall get vision. So we have to communicate in a sense that awakens vision. That's inspiration. Number two, we've got to communicate in a way that is practical, what you've said. And what does that mean? We've got to give the instruction part of the message. So you've said all these nice things, wonderful, nice sounding things. How do I make it part of my everyday life? And then the other thing that I want to share that is usually the missing piece in how we communicate to men is the aspect of victory. What's the end game? What win am I getting as a result of this? For example, if you look at the ideas communicated in scriptures, there is a language of overcoming and receiving a crown or a reward. If you look at, for example, the sports that most men are attracted to, men who play well, for example, in the World Cup, there is somebody who will receive the golden boot. There is somebody who will receive a certain award, a medal. So there has to be, what is the win for me as a man as a result of taking this journey? By the way, when men feel like there is no win at the end of a journey, they're not willing to start the journey. But when they feel, there is a win for me here, they will be willing to start engaging in the journey. So there is inspiration, there is instruction, there is the victory proposition. What is the end game for this? And that is what drives a lot of men.
What do you say about authenticity? How do you present?
Yeah, and again, I think one of the other things that I've noticed in how most messages are packaged, they are packaged with a lack of humanity within them. One of the things that I usually encourage, especially pastors and leaders of men, be vulnerable. Don't just talk about your wins. Talk about your lapses and times when you missed it, and let men begin to connect with your humanity. One of the interesting things that, again, you see about Jesus, when he rose up from the dead, he showed his wounds. One of the things that invites men into a journey is when they can identify and say, I'm struggling with this. So even you struggled with it. I have struggled with debt. So even you struggled with it. So when men feel like you're willing to be vulnerable, now they feel a safety, and again they're willing to engage. But if you are always presenting truth but never presenting the side of truth that you failed in, then these men again will not be willing to follow through with you. You don't look authentic and genuine to them. You are a pseudo leader, and they want to follow a real leader, not a pseudo leader.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope our listeners are learning. There's an aspect I want us to go to.
Yeah.
So, what does discipleship look like? Because there's something I was looking at that now we are doing a lot of men's conference, a lot of events, but we miss the aspect of discipleship because yes, there is you can have an event, but how does this person go back? Do they have a group so that they can implement whatever has happened in that event? Do they have a discipler, somebody working with them? Because we might do a lot of events and forget about discipleship because somebody has to work with these men apart from doing a lot of events.
Absolutely.
So just speak about that aspect of discipleship. How does it look like?
So, and again, I like the idea that you bring, that events are good to ignite conversations, but they're not enough to deliver transformation. And a lot of what is happening again nowadays is I'm seeing a lot of men's conferences. It's like there's a wake-up call, for men to go and for this event, for that other event. So men go there, they hear something that charges them and awakens them into a certain spiritual reality, but they don't have a follow-up plan on how to make that a daily part of their life. I'll give a practical example of a good movie people can watch, and it practically demonstrates how discipleship works. There's this new movie called Forged. And you see this older man, he gets this younger man, and he begins just an everyday conversation. So he says to this guy, look, why don't we meet over lunch and just have a discussion around this? Now, notice what happens. Number one, there's an invitation to do life together. There is no man that excels in being a man doing life alone. And usually what events do, they bring us together and then we scatter. We scatter back to our caves of being alone. And interestingly, one of the things that I've realized about most men are lonely in life. And part of what discipleship does is that it removes that aspect of a man being alone. Because even the scripture says it is not good for the man to be alone. So doing life together is about creating spaces where people can have conversations that distill the truth into a simple, practical way. I have some young men that I meet with every week, and we just sit over a cup of tea and talk about what's going on in your life. What are the struggles you're having? What are the issues that you're facing? And beyond that, it is not just sharing the truth, it is sharing my life and my journey. If I face this kind of a situation, how did I overcome it? If I was ever tempted by a woman in the office, how did I handle it? And discipleship is bringing the truth down to a place where it is applicable and it is applied to life. In fact, if you are to give a simple definition to discipleship, is doing life together and applying the truth to our lives as we journey together. So what does that mean? It means we've got to reach out to one another as men. Find a group of 2, 3, 4 men. Because again, discipleship does not happen in masses. It happens in smaller groups. And usually what happens is, again, a lot of men want to be in places where they're in masses. Look at football stadiums when we are screaming and Gor Mahia is playing, or our favorite team in the Premier League is playing. We are in masses. But somehow men are struggling to be in small spaces where they can have real conversations about real life and find real solutions from the truth and from their own journey. So it begins with that, inviting one another to small spaces and having a journey that is consistent. It is not a one-off event. It is a consistent engagement where we share together, learn from one another. Again, discipleship is not necessarily one person talking down on another. It is sharing life together and sharpening each other. Proverbs 27:17 summarizes it beautifully. It says, iron sharpens iron. So as I sit here with you, I'm being sharpened. I am sharpening you. By the time we leave here, we are both better because we are doing life together. So discipleship in a nutshell is doing life together in light of truth.
And do you think the men are ready for discipleship because it comes with accountability.
Yes.
It comes with submission.
Yes.
It comes with discipline because you're working with this person. You are doing life with them.
Yes.
You'll ask them, how is your wife? How about your finances?
Yeah.
Are you saving?
Yes.
Do you know how to buy a land? Because we also have to teach the men how to have these particular
disciplines.
skills.
Absolutely.
Apart from even the spiritual.
Yes.
So do you feel the men are ready? Because sometimes somebody might feel cornered.
Yeah.
They run away from accountability. Because if I see Bonnie, he will ask me, how are you doing?
Yeah.
What movie did you watch? Did he have?
Yeah.
Did it have a sex scene? So that accountability. Do you think men are ready for that accountability and feel that this is a safe space? We are going to do life together. And we are learning from each other.
Yeah. So here's the thing that I've come to believe. I think the reason why men don't hate accountability, men hate how accountability is communicated. Because me holding you accountable is not me policing you and trying to catch you doing wrong. Accountability, on the contrary, is more about encouraging somebody to do right than trying to catch them doing wrong. So even if I am accountable to a man and he comes and he tells me, oh, I found myself in this situation, the first point of call is not condemnation. It is encouragement. It is, oh, you've fallen. Let's see how you can rise up again. Because again, if you look at what happens in, for example, war zones, when a soldier is shot, the first thing we do is not to come and ask them, why were you being careless? Why are you the one who was shot? It is to actually find a way to lift them up. Again, Ecclesiastes chapter 4 from verse 9 gives a very beautiful summary of how accountability works. It says two are better than one because number one, they have good reward for their labor. So it is having something that you're working towards together. Accountability is not, are you doing wrong? No, it is, how can we work together towards something that will empower us to be better men? And then it also continues to say that if one falls down, the other one will lift him up. Again, accountability is not bashing the fallen man. Accountability is saying, how do I lift him? Because that could have been me. And it's not laughing at him. Because when we become wise in accountability, we realize that if another man has fallen, my first point should not be to laugh at him. It should be to learn and to run to help him to get up. So if we can sculpture the idea of accountability biblically, men will actually love accountability. But when we try to police men, that's why they run away from accountability. Yes.
So if you look at that aspect of discipleship,
yes.
Now there's someone who will be watching, and they're saying now, at a church level, how do we do discipleship? How do we prioritize? And you have mentioned that it should not be masses.
No.
Because, for example, there are both in the church, there are both elderly people and there are both young teens, which both the young teens need discipleship. Do you think also there is that transfer of the knowledge that the older people have to these young people? So how do I set up a discipleship to make it effective? So that one, you might have some people you are discipling, they are 6. You do life with them, you follow, you just do life with them, but that specific number. So how do we do that in a church setup? Because one, somebody might be watching and say, we normally go through a discipleship program. But we are bringing that aspect of doing life together, look together. And also that aspect of these people that are in church that are older, are they talking to these younger people?
So here is what happens. The reason why discipleship is becoming difficult is because we make it complex. And the easiest way to begin a journey is to simplify it. What is the easiest place to start? If I'm an older man, for example, right now I'm in my 40s, I can go and look for a 20-year-old man and invite them for lunch and say, oh, by the come, let's have a conversation over lunch. And in a simple way, begin conversations that can begin to transfer wisdom from the experiences I've learned, the mistakes I've made, the journeys I've gone through. So it is as simple as that. Everything begins with a conversation. I think sometimes we make things too complex. We are trying to create a program. We are trying to create this very structured thing. No, it is not about all that. It's about, the way you raise a child.
Yeah.
You don't sit down and come up with a book that has 10 rules. No. You first of all identify what are some of the things that I've learned as a parent that I want to transfer. What are some of the mistakes that I've made that I can share? What are some of the pitfalls that I've observed that I can caution somebody? And again, it is not about policing. It is not about trying to force somebody into a certain mold. It is simply about saying the things that I've learned, 2 Timothy 2:2, the things that we've learned, commit to faithful men who will commit to others. So identifying somebody, challenging them to be faithful to the process of doing life together and transferring that truth that you've learned through a relationship. That is as simple as it gets.
Yes.
But sometimes we try to find a mystical side to this thing, like a smart way to do it. No, it is as simple as doing life together, like what Jesus would do. He would go and do miracles out there. Then he would pick his 12 guys, go and sit down and just share. This is what I was doing. This is how it works. So it is about the simplicity of sharing life together and allowing the truth to define how we engage in our interactions with one another. That's as simple as it gets.
So what you're saying is, for example, even if you're going to have events,
yes,
this is what we are saying, that even if you're going to have events, have that particular group should have how they are going to apply.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that particular discipleship platform.
Yeah. So, and you know what the goal of discipleship is? The goal of discipleship is to turn the truth into a lifestyle. So there is this thing that we've learned. How do we bring it down to a place where it becomes part of our habits, part of our philosophy, part of how we live out our lives? So discipleship is only happening to the extent that truth is beginning to affect how we make decisions and how we do life. So that's the crux of the matter. That after we do all these very big events, can we get down to small spaces, intimate spaces where we can be transparent with one another and share how this truth can apply to our lives? And also, I also want to underscore something here that I think is very much neglected in many circles of men. There is a lot out here that is beating up men. When we come down to discipleship spaces, let's make them spaces of encouragement, not spaces of bashing one another. Like, Austin, you've fallen again. See, that's not what discipleship is all about. Discipleship is all about, no matter how many times you fall, I have enough sense as a man to know that I call out the king in you by giving you another chance to rise again. The only time I should give up on you is when you die. For so long as you're alive, I should have the audacity to say, I will fight for my brother. And if that is not the case, then we are not doing discipleship.
So how does one can be able to identify a discipler? Because now people will want to go for somebody who is already, for example, you have somebody who can be able to disciple you at the church.
Yes.
But you have somebody who is far away from your church and you look up to them and you want them to mentor you. How does one come to a conclusion and say, now, Bonnie, I want you to be the one working with me? Because for somebody to come to that extent, they trust you. So how does one identify, now, this is the person I want to work with me?
I think for me, point number one in identifying somebody who can work with you is authenticity. That they are human enough to talk to you, but they are passionate enough to help you to grow. And again, they are willing not only to share from their wins, they are willing to share from their losses. Anytime I see a man always talking about his wins, I usually see a con man, because only a con man has gone through life without losing. But if you've really lived this life and faced life as it is, there must be times when you've missed it. There have to be times when you've failed. There have to be times when you took a wrong move, you made a wrong decision. So for me, it begins there. Is this person authentic? Are they genuine? Do I see the human element of them, but also do I see their passion for truth? So number one is authenticity. I think authenticity is the bottom line of any authentic relationship that will help somebody to grow in discipleship. I think the second thing is the willingness to be accessible, because there are people who are not accessible. Somehow they have a superiority complex, they feel like maybe you are too low to journey with them. And sometimes they put too difficult standards for you to be able to journey with them. So I feel like accessibility is an important part of this journey, because you also don't want to feel like you're forcing yourself into somebody's life. I think the other thing that I think is very important in the discipleship journey is aspiration. Is this person showing a consistent pattern of growth? You don't want to follow somebody who has stopped growing, because guess what? They are setting a template for you. If they've stopped growing, then at some point you will also get to a place where you'll hit a ceiling. So you want to follow somebody who has authenticity, accessibility, and aspiration as a basic. There are many other things you will look for. For example, you want to look at somebody's consistency. You want to look at somebody's integrity. You want to look at somebody's humility. But as a baseline, let them be authentic. Let them be accessible. Let them show that they have an aspiration to continually grow.
And what do you do with people who are, because one, you'll find a person who's big and you want to disciple them. Even in these events where men go, somebody realizes truth too much late, and to unlearn becomes a very big task. So what do you think about us being able to go to these people that are in secondary, these young ones, so that we catch these people at a young stage, so that somebody does not have to go up to 30 to 40 and realize this was the truth. And learning becomes a very... So how do we do discipleship, especially for the Gen Z people who are in high school? Because if we focus on high schoolers, we model, we create a foundation at an early stage.
Absolutely.
Instead of waiting and trying to break whatever was done, we try to undone these things. So what do you think about discipleship at high school level, so that we curb a lot of things from that point?
And by the way, if you were to ask me, that's where it should all begin, because the formation of a man, in fact, it begins to crystallize in his teen years. If you look at most men that have turned out well and they've made lesser mistakes, even in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, it is because of a foundation they got when they were in their teenage. Because an older man reached out to them and began doing life with them. Now, the other thing that I've also noticed, especially with us as we get older, we get so busy and get caught up in the rat race of life, where it's about buying a house, buying a car, building a new business. We forget that at the end of the day, life will not only be measured by what you achieve, it will be measured by who you raise. So as you try to achieve and you try to conquer all these territories, do you have time in your schedule where you say, I'm going to carve out time to go and give back? I'm going to carve out time and go and share my career journey. I'm going to carve out time and go and share what mistakes I've made in my life. And there's something I've realized. There is nothing as fulfilling as seeing another young man coming up and turning out well because of wisdom that you shared with them. So I usually say, you spend your years earning wisdom, you need to spend other years giving it back to the next generation. That means you've got to be intentional. You have to carve out time. I go to my son's high school just to speak to the boys, just to share with them my life. Because I'm realizing you can get so caught up trying to do things that you forget that, hey, you need to raise people. And those people will be your legacy. If you never invested in anyone, a building that you built can crumble in a day. We are seeing in California now, buildings are burning. But if you invest in people and raise people, then there is a sustainability of your legacy in that.
And also, fathers have a huge role to play, because everything begins back
at home.
Back at home. So fathers, because we have heard of absent father.
Yes.
Those fathers that who are not present in the child's life. What do you say to them?
Again, the mistake that fathers make many times is to think that giving presence will substitute their absence. But they fail to realize that life will never stop being busy. It is you that as a father has to prioritize your life in a certain way where you say, after I do this much work, I'll take a break and go and be with my children. And that's why, interestingly, somebody said that when boys grow older, rarely do they write songs for their fathers. They write songs for their mothers because their mothers were there. But the fathers were busy doing all sorts of things. So I usually say, create memories with your children. And how will you create memories when you're absent? How will you create memories when you're forever away from them? There has to be a time when you hit the pause button and say, I'm going to take some time out and be with my son. And there are many activities. By the way, being with your son is not being with him in the house. Because sons don't connect with fathers in the house. They need you to take them out somewhere. Go and play some bowling. Go and do some mountain climbing. Go and do some team activity that engages their energy. They will remember that. I remember when I was growing up as a young man, some of the memories I have with my father is times he took us out and we did activities together. We went and did a boat ride together and things that created a bonding experience outside the home. Daughters bond with their mothers inside the homes. Sons bond with their fathers outside the homes.
There's someone who told me that when a boy finds himself in the sitting room, and you are there, they feel like they're cornered. They want to be lectured.
But
when you have those conversations as you hike, it makes it easy.
And guess what? The lessons sink better. I went for a hike with my two boys some time back, and just sharing lessons with them, like when they climb the hill and they get tired, what did you learn out of that? Those experiences end up being cemented in their minds because boys learn in a visual way. Boys don't learn by the words they hear. They learn by the pictures they see. So if you can create events around them having experiences that put certain pictures in their minds, those lessons will stay with them for a long time. But lectures may not work.
And there's something I want you to touch on. It is in a book you recently shared. You are reading. I've forgotten the author, but there is a reviewer was seeing it. He was saying men of intimacy, how you should be intimate, have intimacy with God. So from the discussion we have had, I'm trying to look at it in a way that one, we have said we should not create that emotional. So how does a man reach that level of intimacy with God? And initially we were saying we should be able to have a language that is kind of military, so that it makes the man hard, not soft. So how does a man come to a point of intimacy with God?
So here's the thing that I've realized. For men, we need to create journeys that help them to make sense of spiritual truth. And that's why, for example, if you take, like what we're saying, if you take men on a hike and begin to share with them truth in those experiences, knowing God is like climbing a mountain. You've got to conquer yourself because you cannot climb a mountain if you've not conquered yourself. It's actually not the mountain you conquer, it's yourself that you conquer. So creating experiences that allow men to have journeys that show them spiritual truth, that will cause them to begin to see God in a way that relates with them as men. I'll give you a very practical example. Jesus was one of the biggest leaders of men. Look at the places where you find Jesus with men. He's on a hillside with men. He's on a boat with men. He's in a business environment with men. So he's in spaces where he's actually using natural things to teach them spiritual truth. He goes and finds some guys in a boat and he tells them, follow me. Whatever you're doing, you don't need to stop doing it. I will make you fishers of something more than fish. I will make you fishers of men. Now, notice again the language. He's giving them a higher aspiration. He's telling them, you cannot only fish, you can fish men. Now, those kinds of experiences help men to cement truth into their hearts. Again, even the way sometimes our churches, even the pulpits, the way they are decorated, does it appeal to men? That's a debate for another day. But sometimes you see there are flowers. How many men are attracted to flowers? Right? But if we can even begin occasionally to create pictures that allow men to connect with truth, then that would help men to find their journey to finding God being easier. But if it's always about, trying to feminize and softenize the gospel, then we may find it very difficult to get men engaged spiritually.
Yeah, and there's this aspect of being intimacy with other men.
Yeah.
How does someone be able to open up? Because, for example, in a church setup where people are praying, people are doing all these things, how do we find men to have those particular?
So vulnerability begins with transparency. Many years ago, when I was newly married, I remember one time I preached a sermon and I called it "The Day I Almost Committed Adultery." I cannot begin to tell you how many men followed me after I preached that sermon because they would see themselves in that language. Because every man gets to that point of, I almost did. So when they hear another man opening up their lives and being vulnerable and saying, oh, but it's not only you struggling with that, I've also had this challenge. This is how I navigated it. So if we can begin to also create a place where there is psychological safety for men, we will begin to find men loving brotherhood. Interestingly, I find it interesting that it's in Christianity where sometimes brotherhood is weak. But if you look, for example, at some of the other extra religious outfits, like the Freemasons, you hear about the brotherhood and all those kinds of things. All I'm saying is that there is a hunger in men to connect with something great, to connect with God, and to connect with other men. If we can find the language that unlocks the code of the heart of men, men will be connected. But it's a lot of work. And again, most people don't like work. That's why we don't do things that get men connected.
Gathering them
is work.
A
lot of work. Yeah.
Because you tell them, come to Bible study.
Yes.
They don't get...
Yeah. If you call them for Nyama, they'll come. But if you call them for Bible study, they won't come.
So I want the people to be able to get, now, what now do we do? There is a church that has not started a men's ministry and they've heard of this. There's a church and saying, oh, now we can be able not to just do events, also look at the aspect of discipleship. How do we move forward? You have looked at how our country is, and priorities are not much for the men. So what will you advise the church to do? Yes.
Sometimes I think we fail to see change because we try to begin change large scale. As opposed to asking, what would the church do? I would ask myself, what should every man do at their level? There's a quote by Mahatma Gandhi where he said, be the change that you want to see. Are you a man and you want to see the dynamic around men's ministry changing? Begin by reaching out to the man closest to you. I was coming from a men's meeting recently from a place called Fort Smith. And as we were coming back with a friend of mine, my car had a mechanical problem. So what did I do? The car stalled and we had to push it out of the road. So as we pushed it out of the road, I had to call my mechanic. It was on a Sunday. Being a Sunday, now, of course, he had to use a border rider and all that. So this border rider came with my mechanic to come and fix my car. And when they got to where the car was, we just started a conversation with this border guy and just started having a conversation like, where are you in life? What's going on in your life? Let me tell you, after about 30 minutes of a conversation with that guy, he opened up his life and just said things that made me realize why he needed to come that day. Because started saying, oh, I got into an incident of infidelity and I've been struggling with guilt and I'm afraid of facing my wife. And we just had a conversation there, man to man, like, these are the next steps, what you can do. We talked to the guy, led the guy to Christ. And I mean, it's amazing what a simple 30 minutes conversation can do. So sometimes we try to do macro change instead of just beginning micro. Like, what's the best place to begin? There's a young man in your neighborhood that is struggling with drugs. Why not reach out to them? He's been rejected by everybody. Reach out to them, give them hope, give them encouragement, give them a vision for their lives. And if one man can reach out to one man, the whole world can change in a very short time if men become intentional. So don't wait for what your church can do. Start at your level. I usually say, if you think you are too big to start small, you are too small to ever become big. Find the smallest place you can begin and begin. There is a man around you that you can encourage. Go encourage them. Give them the gift of vision and hope. And as you do that, that can have a ripple effect that can have a long-term strategy of transformation for men.
Yeah, and I hope our viewers who are listening have heard of our conversation on are we effectively ministering to men. And I hope you're going to take charge. You're going to start from where you are, from your church, and this conversation is going to continue. I told you as we were beginning, this is your number one men's Christian podcast, the Men's Chamber. And just as we finish, what is out there in terms of now the conferences and everything? There's a man there who is watching you right now and will want to reach out to you. How do people find you? So you'll just look at this camera. How will people find you? What are those specific things that you do?
Yeah.
And how your social media handles and how they can find you, so that you also be able to these things we cannot be able to conclude them here.
Yeah.
So you can follow Boniface. He'll tell you where to find him. Yeah.
So thank you once again for giving me this amazing opportunity to just have this conversation. If you want to find me, I'm on Facebook. Boniface Nyoikenganga is my Facebook name. I also run a forum for men called Authentic Men Community. That meeting meets once a month at Aga 7th Memorial Park. Every second Friday of the month, we are there. So you want to find me on Twitter, they call it X nowadays.
Yes.
I don't know whether it means we've been X'd or what does it mean. I'm Boni_Nganga. If you want to find me on Instagram, Boniface Nyoikenganga. You go on YouTube, type my name, you'll find all sorts of content that I've done on men and on other issues of life. And if you want to find me on phone, I'm on 0723 562 587. 0723 562 587. If you WhatsApp me, I will always respond.
Yeah. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you for our viewers for watching. Watch out for episode 2 of the Men's Chamber. Yes.